A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my Weird Prompts. We have a really heavy one today, and I mean that both literally and figuratively. Our housemate Daniel sent us a link earlier this week about something that most people would have just scrolled past without a second thought, but it caught his eye for a very good reason. It was a sighting of a Boeing E-4B, better known as the Nightwatch, or more colloquially, the Doomsday Plane. It was spotted at Los Angeles International Airport in early January of this year, 2026. Now, usually, these planes stay tucked away at Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska or Joint Base Andrews, so seeing one at a major commercial hub like LAX is, frankly, a massive anomaly. Imagine you are sitting at the gate, waiting for your flight to Phoenix or Seattle, and you look out the window and see this massive, windowless, stark-white 747 with a blue stripe and a weird hump on its back, taxiing past a Southwest jet. It is a jarring contrast between the mundane world of commercial travel and the existential reality of nuclear deterrence.
Herman Poppleberry here. And you are absolutely right, Corn. That sighting on January 9th was the first time in the 51-year operational history of the E-4B that it has ever been documented landing at LAX. The Air Force gave their standard line about training missions requiring travel to a wide variety of locations, but for those of us who track the nuclear command and control architecture, that is a very thin explanation. Especially when you consider that just a few days ago, on March 3rd, we saw the test launch of an unarmed Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile from Vandenberg Space Force Base. These things are rarely coincidences. We are seeing a lot of movement in the nervous system of our national defense right now. When you see the Nightwatch moving to the west coast, and then a few weeks later a Minuteman III streaks across the Pacific, you have to realize that the military is exercising the muscles of the nuclear triad.
It really does feel like the gears are turning behind the scenes. And that is what we are going to dig into today. We are talking about the architecture of the end of the world, or more accurately, the architecture that is designed to prevent it through credible deterrence. We are going to look at the Nightwatch, the upcoming shift in the Looking Glass mission, and the famous Presidential Emergency Satchel, which everyone knows as the nuclear football. Herman, I want to start with the plane itself. Why do we still rely on a 51-year-old airframe, a modified Boeing 747-200, for the most critical command job on the planet?
It is a great question, and it comes down to a few very specific technical requirements that modern jets actually struggle to meet. The E-4B is essentially a flying pentagon. It is officially known as the National Airborne Operations Center, or NAOC. It is designed to be a survivable, mobile command post for the President, the Secretary of Defense, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The reason we use those older airframes is partly because they are rugged and heavily modified to survive an electromagnetic pulse, or EMP. If a nuclear weapon detonates in the atmosphere, the resulting pulse would fry the delicate digital flight control systems of a brand new, highly efficient Dreamliner or a 787. The E-4B uses older, more shielded technology, including some analog flight instruments, that is hardened against that specific threat. It is a beast of a machine. It has a massive thermal and acoustic shield to protect the crew and the electronics from the heat and radiation of a nuclear blast. If you look at the top of the plane, there is that distinct hump behind the cockpit. That is a specialized antenna housing for satellite communications that can punch through the interference caused by a nuclear environment.
Right, and it is not just one plane. There are only 4 of them in the entire fleet, operated by the 1st Airborne Command and Control Squadron. I was reading that at least one of them is on 24-hour alert at all times, 365 days a year. When you think about the logistics of keeping a 50-year-old jumbo jet ready to launch at a moment's notice, it is staggering. But what really fascinates me is the endurance. These planes can stay airborne for days, right?
With aerial refueling, the E-4B can theoretically stay up as long as the engine oil holds out. They have done missions that exceeded 72 hours. It has a crew of up to 112 people, which is the largest crew of any U.S. Air Force aircraft. It is divided into different zones, a briefing room, a conference room, a communications area, and even a rest area. It is designed so that the leadership of the United States can run a full-scale war from 30,000 feet while the ground-based infrastructure is in chaos. This is the nervous system we talked about back in episode 767. The nuclear triad, the subs, the silos, and the bombers is the muscle, but without the E-4B and the communication links, that muscle is paralyzed. If the underground bunkers at Strategic Command in Nebraska were taken out, the E-4B becomes the brain of the entire American military.
That brings us to the recent news about the Air Force reclaiming the Looking Glass mission. For our listeners who might not be familiar, Looking Glass is a specific part of this. Since 1998, the Navy has been handling this using the E-6B Mercury fleet. But now, the Air Force is moving to take it back. Why the change now? In late 2025 and early 2026.
This is a major structural shift. To understand why it matters, you have to understand what Looking Glass does. It is the airborne mirror of the ground-based command centers. If the underground bunkers are destroyed, the Looking Glass aircraft can actually issue the launch codes directly to the Minuteman III missile silos using what is called the Airborne Launch Control System, or ALCS. Now, for the last 27 years, the Navy has been doing this. They used the E-6B Mercury to handle both Looking Glass and the TACAMO mission, which stands for Take Charge and Move Out. TACAMO is how we talk to our ballistic missile submarines, but the Air Force wants their own dedicated platform again because the mission is getting more complex. They are looking at the new E-4C, which they are calling the Survivable Airborne Operations Center, or SAOC. In fact, Sierra Nevada Corporation was awarded the contract to build these new planes, and they are going to be using newer 747-8 airframes. General Bussière has been very vocal about needing 6 to 8 of these new planes to ensure we have enough coverage.
It seems like they are moving away from the one-plane-fits-all approach of the Navy's Mercury fleet. If the Air Force gets their way, they will have a dedicated fleet of 747-based E-4Cs specifically for the high-level command and Looking Glass missions, while the Navy focuses on the E-130J for the submarine communication part. That E-130J is a modified Hercules, right? That is a very different kind of plane than a jumbo jet.
It is. The Hercules is rugged and can land on much shorter runways, which is great for the TACAMO mission where you might need to disperse to smaller airfields. But it does not have the space or the endurance of a jumbo jet for a full battle staff. The submarine mission is incredibly technical, corn. To talk to a submarine that is deep underwater, you cannot use regular radio waves because they do not penetrate the water. You have to use very low frequency, or VLF, waves. The E-6B, and soon the E-130J, actually unspools a wire antenna that is miles long behind the plane to broadcast those signals. It is wild to think about a plane flying in a tight circle, what they call a cloverleaf pattern, with a 5-mile-long wire trailing behind it just to send a short text message to a submarine in the Atlantic or the Pacific. The plane has to fly in such a way that the wire hangs as vertically as possible to get the signal down into the depths.
It is like something out of a Cold War thriller, but it is the reality of our current defense posture. And speaking of Cold War thrills, we have to talk about the most iconic piece of this whole puzzle, the nuclear football. Officially, it is the Presidential Emergency Satchel. Most people imagine it as a literal button, but as we have discussed before, that is a total misconception. It is a 45-pound black leather briefcase. Herman, you have been digging into the history of this. It goes all the way back to the Eisenhower administration, right?
It does. A naval officer named Edward L. Beach Jr. is credited with the original concept. Eisenhower wanted a way to ensure that the president could always communicate with the Pentagon and authorize a response, even if he was away from the White House. Today, it is carried by a military aide who is never more than a few feet away from the president. There are 5 aides who rotate this duty, one from each branch of the military. They are hand-picked, they undergo the most intense background checks imaginable, what they call Yankee White clearance, and they are essentially the president's shadow. They are with him on Air Force One, in the motorcade, at state dinners, and even when he goes to the doctor.
I have always wondered about the physical toll of that, carrying a 45-pound bag everywhere you go. If the president goes for a jog, the aide is jogging. If the president is at a state dinner, the aide is standing right there in the wings. There is actually a decommissioned satchel in the Smithsonian National Museum of American History. If you ever get a chance to see it, it looks surprisingly mundane from the outside. It is just a zero Halliburton case covered in black leather. But what is inside is what matters. It is not a red button. It is a menu.
It is often described as having four main components. First, there is the Black Book, which is about 75 pages long and contains the SIOP, or the Single Integrated Operational Plan. This is basically the menu of nuclear strike options. It is not just fire everything. It is a list of specific targets, levels of response, and the projected casualties for each option. Then there is a list of secure bunker locations where the president can be taken for safety places like Mount Weather or Raven Rock. Third, there is a folder containing instructions for the emergency alert system. And finally, there is the most important part, the authentication codes.
And those codes are on a small laminated card that the president carries personally, right? The one they call the Biscuit.
Correct. The Biscuit contains a series of letters and numbers. When the president wants to authorize a strike, he has to provide a specific code from that card to the duty officer at Strategic Command. This proves that the person giving the order is actually the president. The football provides the options and the communication gear to reach the command centers, but the Biscuit provides the identity verification. It is a two-step process. The president doesn't have to memorize the codes, he just has to have the card. But he does have to be briefed on the options. Every new president gets a very sobering briefing on the contents of that bag and the weight of the decisions they might have to make in a matter of minutes.
This is where the human element gets really interesting and, frankly, a bit terrifying. Because as much as we talk about hardened electronics and miles of wire antennas, it ultimately comes down to people. There have been moments in history where this system was tested in ways that no one planned for. You mentioned the 1981 assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan. That was a huge wake-up call for the continuity of government protocols.
It was a total mess, Corn. When Reagan was shot and rushed to George Washington University Hospital, his clothes were cut off by the emergency room staff. The Biscuit, the card with the codes, was in his pocket. It ended up in a plastic bag with his bloody clothes discarded on the floor. Meanwhile, the military aide with the football was separated from the president in the chaos of the motorcade. The aide actually tried to get into the hospital but was initially blocked by the FBI and Secret Service because everything was so frantic. For a brief period of time, the president was incapacitated, the codes were in a pile of laundry, and the football was blocks away. That is why the vice president's role is so critical. There is actually a second football that stays with the vice president at all times, just in case.
And that brings up the chain of succession. We know the legal order, Vice President, Speaker of the House, President pro tempore of the Senate, and then the cabinet secretaries. But in a nuclear crisis, everything happens so fast. This is why the designated survivor protocol exists during events like the State of the Union. One person in the line of succession is kept at a secure, undisclosed location with their own military aide and their own football. But beyond the legal succession, there is the two-person rule, which people often misunderstand. They think the president has sole authority, and while he does have the sole authority to order a strike, he cannot physically execute it alone.
That is a vital distinction. The system is designed so that no single person, not even the president, can launch a nuclear weapon in a vacuum. The order has to be verified by the Secretary of Defense. Now, the Secretary of Defense does not have a veto. If the order is legal and authenticated, he is required to pass it on, but he serves as a second node of verification. Then, once the order reaches the actual launch crews in the silos or on the submarines, they also have a two-person rule. Two different people have to turn two different keys simultaneously, and those keys are far enough apart that one person cannot reach both. It is a system built on mutual distrust and mutual verification. It is designed to prevent a rogue individual from starting a nuclear war, while still allowing for a rapid response if the order is legitimate.
It is a fascinating balance between the need for speed, because ICBMs can hit their targets in under 30 minutes, and the need for absolute certainty. I want to go back to that Minuteman III test from March 3rd, the GT-255 test. You mentioned it earlier, but there was one detail in the Air Force Global Strike Command statement that really stood out to me. Usually, these tests carry a single unarmed re-entry vehicle, but this one carried two. That is a very specific signal to send to the world.
It is a massive signal. The Minuteman III is capable of carrying what are called MIRVs, or multiple independently targetable reentry vehicles. This means one missile can drop warheads on several different targets. For a long time, under various treaties like START, we moved towards single warhead configurations to reduce tensions. But by testing two reentry vehicles on a single missile in early 2026, the United States is demonstrating that we still have the technical capability and the readiness to deploy multiple warheads if the strategic environment demands it. It is a way of saying, our deterrent is not just functional, it is flexible. It is a reminder to adversaries that we can scale up our response if the global situation continues to deteriorate.
And it is happening right as we are seeing these weird movements with the Nightwatch. You have to wonder if the LAX landing in January was part of a larger exercise to test how the command and control architecture handles a shift in the Pacific. If you are worried about tensions in Asia, having the Doomsday Plane land on the West Coast instead of staying in the middle of the country makes a certain kind of sense. It puts the command post closer to the theater of operations and tests the logistics of operating out of a major civilian hub.
It definitely does. And it is worth noting that the Navy recently deployed an E-6B Mercury to Greenland for Arctic defense operations in late 2025. The Arctic is becoming a major front for strategic competition as the ice melts and new shipping lanes open up. Seeing our nuclear command planes moving into these specific spots, LAX, Greenland, Vandenberg, it tells a story of a military that is very focused on the nervous system of war. They are making sure the lines of communication are open and the equipment is ready, even if that equipment is 50 years old. They are testing the reach of the system.
It makes me think about episode 790, where we broke down the combatant commands. Strategic Command, or STRATCOM, is the one in charge of all this. They are based at Offutt, but their reach is global. I think what people forget is that this is not just about the planes and the missiles. It is about the continuity of government. There are massive underground bunkers like Mount Weather in Virginia and Raven Rock in Pennsylvania. The E-4B is just the airborne version of that, and is all part of a single massive web designed to ensure that the United States government never stops functioning, no matter what happens. If the President is in the air, the Speaker is in a bunker, and the Secretary of State is at a different secure location, the system is designed to link them all together.
That is the ultimate goal of deterrence. If an adversary knows that they cannot decapitate the U.S. leadership, if they know that even if Washington, D.C. is gone, the president or his successor is in a hardened plane or a mountain bunker with the ability to strike back, then they are much less likely to pull the trigger in the first place. The Nightwatch is a visible reminder of that. It is loud, it is huge, and it is unmistakable. It is a flying pentagon that says, we are still here and we are still in control. It is psychological warfare as much as it is a technical platform.
So, what does this mean for the average person? Most of us are never going to see a nuclear football, and we probably will not notice an E-4B unless we are aviation nerds like us. But there are practical takeaways here. For one, the shift to the E-4C SAOC program is going to be a huge industrial undertaking. Sierra Nevada Corporation is taking the lead, but they are using Boeing airframes. It shows that we are entering a new era of nuclear modernization. We are moving away from the post-Cold War peace dividend and back into a period where the survivable layer of the triad is getting a lot of investment. We are spending billions to ensure that the nervous system is as modern as the missiles it controls.
Another takeaway is just how much of this is actually hidden in plain sight. If you are interested in this stuff, you can actually track these planes. They often fly with their transponders on. If you use a flight tracking app like ADS-B Exchange, and you see a plane with the call sign Titan or EDG or Gordo, those are often associated with the E-4B or E-6B fleets. The military knows people are watching, and sometimes letting the world see a doomsday plane moving around is part of the message. It is a form of quiet posturing. They want the world to know they are practicing.
It is the ultimate walk softly and carry a big stick strategy. You don't have to make a big speech about nuclear weapons if you just land a Nightwatch at LAX and let the internet do the talking for you. I also think it is worth reflecting on the role of those military aides. We focus on the high-tech planes, but the fact that a human being has to physically carry a 45-pound bag and stay within arm's reach of the president 24/7 is a powerful reminder that our ultimate defense rests on human discipline. Those aides represent the link between the civilian leadership and the military execution. They are the ones who have to ensure that the biscuit and the football are always where they need to be, even in the middle of a crisis.
And they are truly the best of the best. They have to be ready to act in a split second under the most extreme pressure imaginable. It is one of the most stressful jobs in the world, yet they have to remain invisible. You see them in the background of every photo of the president, just a shadow with a black bag. It is a heavy burden, quite literally. They are the human fail-safe in a system of machines.
Well, this has been a sobering but fascinating look into a world that most of us hopefully never have to see in action. From the 50-year-old E-4B landing at LAX to the new E-4C on the horizon, the nervous system of our defense is constantly evolving. And whether it is the trailing wire antennas talking to submarines, or the biscuit card in the president's pocket, the goal remains the same: stability through strength. It is about making sure the Doomsday Plane never actually has to fulfill its primary mission.
And I think we're going to see a lot more of this quiet activity throughout 2026. The GT-255 test was just one piece of the puzzle. As the Air Force takes back the Looking Glass mission and we start seeing the first E-130Js entering service, the landscape of nuclear command and control is going to look very different by the end of this decade. We are watching the transition from the Cold War legacy to a 21st century architecture.
We will definitely be keeping an eye on it. If you enjoyed this deep dive, we would really appreciate it if you could leave a review on your podcast app or on Spotify. It genuinely helps other people find the show and allows us to keep doing these long-form explorations. We have nearly 1,000 episodes in the archive now, covering everything from battery chemistry to presidential downtime, so there is plenty more to explore at myweirdprompts.com.
Yeah, every review helps. And thanks again to Daniel for spotting that LAX sighting. It is easy to miss the significant things when they are disguised as just another airplane, but in this case, the Doomsday Plane was sending a message that was loud and clear. It reminds us to keep our eyes on the skies.
Thanks for listening to My Weird Prompts. I am Corn Poppleberry.
And I am Herman Poppleberry. We will catch you in the next episode.
Take care, everyone. Stay curious and stay vigilant.
Until next time.
You know, Herman, I was thinking about that 45-pound bag. Do you think they have to do specific weight training for that? Like briefcase curls?
I wouldn't be surprised. Those guys are in peak physical condition. You can't be huffing and puffing when the president decides to take the stairs and you're carrying the codes for the entire nuclear arsenal. They probably have a very specific workout routine just to keep their shoulders from giving out.
It's a good point. I'll stick to my sloth-like pace and just talk about it from the studio. I don't think I can handle the pressure or the heavy lifting.
Probably for the best. All right, let's head out.
See ya.
This has been My Weird Prompts. Find us at myweirdprompts.com for the full archive and more.
Bye for now.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My Weird Prompts, that's the close from sloth, from man, from long-eared host. My Weird Prompts, until next time, stay curious, keep weird.